Okay, good morning to everyone. I am Rocío Fernández. I work for Banco de España and I take care of training, development and internal communications. And within our team, Ana Ramos, who is head of development, she also handles diversity and inclusion with a partially dedicated team. So at this panel, at this roundtable, we are going to talk about getting diversity into the top of the organizations. And while preparing this discussion, we identified two angles we wanted to talk about. So the first angle is about how to promote diversity into leadership roles. And the second angle, it's more about how to encourage leadership commitment to D&I. But before we get into discussion, I would like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and also share the main challenges they have within their organizations in D&I matters. Maybe Sarah?
Morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sarah Guerra, and I'm the Head of Culture, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at the Bank of England. My pronouns are she and her. I really want to thank people for inviting us here today. I found the whole 2 days so interesting, and happy International Women's Day. I've only been in my role 2 years, or less than 2 years actually, and I'm a newbie to the Bank of England, I'm a newbie to central banks, I'm a newbie to the financial sector. And it's kind of up against 300 years of history. And I think that's one of our main challenges, that we as an organisation are part of the British establishment. We're an institution, and that represents something, and it represents something in different people's minds, but it can also make it difficult to think about what does it mean to change and what does it mean to be more in shape, in tune with UK society as it exists in 2024. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I feel like I'm only going to repeat lots of stuff. We have been working in a really tough external environment. That's both in terms of the economics around the world, but also in the UK. There is a culture war, and it may be that it's happening everywhere, but particularly, and we saw that even this week, that work on diversity, equity and inclusion is really kind of a political football at the moment. And then another big challenge we have is around... So the UK was really progressive and introduced some legislation back in 2010. That legislation now often feels like it's slightly out of date, and there's many parts of it that are unclear, that create lots of different tensions and conflicts in the workplace and in amongst different protected characteristics, which is what we call the different demographics that we're required to protect by law. And then it's just an ever-growing scene of complexity internally and externally. And what I perceive is increased demand from all the different parts of our internal population and external population, and really high expectations where we haven't yet ramped up to be the kind of modern, agile organisation that can work out what to do as things are happening. So it often feels like we're kind of seeing it, watch it, and then it's like, oh, what should we do? But the moment has passed, which then magnifies and amplifies the kind of problem. And then we have what I describe as the left outs, which is partly what we were talking about earlier, and then also the kind of what about this and what about that, which is that I've always felt as a distraction, but it is part of the journey that people don't necessarily understand what's going on, and they seek to clarify their understanding, and it can feel like an attack. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Eva.
Thank you, and very happy to be here. I'm Eva Murciano. I'm leading HR in the European Central Bank, and I've been there for very long now. And we have our own, we call it journey on this topic, that is very similar to that of many organizations. And I think, hearing the previous panels, many similar challenges as well. We started this focus on diversity and inclusion from a place of almost not wanting to go there, because back 20 years ago, it was felt we are by design a diverse institution, you know. I mean, we have nationalities from around Europe, so it comes by design. We don't need to make much of an effort until it became a problem, until we were in the headlines, in the news, and we were asked, how come in your top leadership you have so few women? And some political appointments were even being challenged. And that generated a burning platform. And that is one of the things that has served us well throughout this journey, which every time have a different burning platform. And of course, we started our journey on more the focus on gender, which in a way addresses many facets of diversity, but it was a focus on gender. And from there, we grew. And the reason why I'm explaining this to you is because this is, I think, a great achievement, but also a big challenge at the moment, because it's difficult to convince our workforce that diversity is more than gender. We do a lot more, but somehow this stigma is still there, no matter how much more data we collect, events we do, networks we support. So we have to fight a little bit with this situation, in doing that, also bringing across the concept of intersectionality. Like, let's try to find intersections of diversity that are really going to support several aspects of diversity and not just one, to avoid this element of competition that sometimes we have seen growing across different minority, although gender is not a minority, groups within the organization. And maybe the last, and it was mentioned, this backlash is a real issue. And the backlash comes in the topic of gender, but it also comes with a certain fatigue. Here they come again with a diversity event or whatever, yeah? So there's these two components, and just I would like to finish by saying I'm fully convinced that it's not about becoming slower on this or almost becoming silent on that, so that, we kind of go through this and resurface later. I think it's about getting louder and explaining better and engaging and putting really the messages out there. So that's really, in essence, the challenges we have.
Thank you. Shauna.
Thanks. Hello, everyone, and indeed, thanks very much for inviting us to the conference. I work in a central bank, but I'm not an economist, and I found the discussions yesterday, so interesting and insightful. I joined the Central Bank of Ireland back in 2011, and in terms of my current role, I'm actually the Director of Enforcement and Anti-Money Laundering. And I suspect some of you might ask, well, why are you here for a conference on diversity, equity and inclusion? And the reason for that is how we have structured ourselves in terms of diversity and inclusion in the Central Bank, which is that I'm the executive sponsor of diversity and inclusion. So I might speak a little bit about how we have come at that from an organisational perspective. So I would work very closely with Micheál, albeit that my day-to-day functional responsibilities are in other parts of the mandate of the central bank. But I suppose, look, one of the things that I'm most proud about in terms of working in the Central Bank of Ireland is that we have had a sustained commitment to diversity and inclusion over a number of years. And I think that has permeated through the entire organisation. I think the challenge, and I hear the question on, this idea of backlash, I think the challenge is to continue to build a consensus around the value of it, the importance of it, and the full dimensions of it. Because I think one of the things, and we similarly would have a journey of a lot of focus on gender, and there were reasons for that, but we also have a rapidly changing context in Ireland that we are really kind of clear and focused now in terms of diversity and inclusion. The 2022 census in Ireland told us that 1 in 5 people living in Ireland now were not born in Ireland. We are a country that historically, saw emigration from Ireland, and our recent history now is people want to come and live and work in Ireland. And we, as a public sector organisation, as a Central Bank of Ireland with the mandate that we have, want to reflect the society that we serve. So that's for me, it's about, I don't think our commitment is wavering. I think our understanding of what that commitment is changing, and I think that is sort of the next iteration for me in terms of, and I think disability as well, I think sometimes, our national legislation sets, targets for public sector organisations. We see the target move from 3% to 6% by 2024. And it's not to say that we are looking at it only because it is a target. It's a value that we espouse anyway. But I think that does give focus and clarity in terms of, we every time in D&I you come back to the data. I know we had a shortened discussion on it earlier. What does the data tell you? What are you measuring? And there's a power to that because it galvanises action. And I think that's really important. So those are some of the context or challenges for the Central Bank of Ireland.
Thank you.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, this is a privilege for me. It's an honor being here. My name is Juan Manuel Delgado. I'm a head of HR in Banco de España. It's a privilege for 3 reasons. I was thinking about that. The first one is because I'm surrounded by amazing people. Ana and Rocío, they are moderating this, organizing this, but they are the experts in D&I, so I wonder what I am doing here. But if you have any question, probably they will have the right answers. The second reason is that I am the last member of the panel talking about our challenges, and I think that our challenges in Banco de España are a good summary of the things that my colleagues have just mentioned, so it's another advantage. And the third one is that Margarita has briefly and brilliantly summarized their challenges that Banco de España has at that level. 3 elements, just to put this in a nutshell. The first one is that we are fully aligned with all the steps done by the Euro system, SSM, ESCB. I think that I summarized the main elements that we need to bear in mind when running this D&I agendas. The Margarita was talking, and this is the D&I Charter, was talking about promote a diverse, inclusive talent. She was talking about build equal opportunity workplace, and last but not least, promote a sense of inclusion of people. And this is our guide. Every time we have the opportunity to develop a project, an option, an alternative to foster diversity and inclusion, we bear this in mind. Margarita has just mentioned another very interesting concept, which is the uniqueness. I think that was the word. It's a holistic approach to the agenda that we are trying to run. That said, this is the first point. There are 2 elements in which Banco de España is putting special focus. And the main challenges is, 1, keep focus, and the second one, anticipate future scenarios. We need to keep focus on initiatives that help us to improve gender balance at the top levels of our organizations. That is clear. We are making a positive progress over the last years, but there is still work to be done, and we must not stop. This is very clear. We cannot wait 48 years. I think that are the years in which we will find this total balance is unacceptable. The second element is that we need to anticipate a future that is already here and progress with intergenerational diversity. This is a word difficult for Spaniards, because Margarita also has difficulties. Yeah, I accept this. This is part of the diversity as well, different cultures and languages. So navigating through this demographical shift, this demographical winter, I think that she mentioned, is key. Balancing the needs and expectations of the people, multi-generational workforce, while providing solutions for both areas and people seems fundamental for the future. And this is our challenge. That's why we have a special focus in these 2 elements that we are going to keep on working.
Thank you very much for your introduction and for sharing your challenges, which of course some are similar across all the organizations. Let's focus on our first angle we mentioned. So regarding the promotion of diversity into leadership roles, I would ask you to share what barriers do you face on the one hand and what supports you find on the other. So maybe we can start by you, Eva.
I thought so. You were looking in my direction. Oh my God. Okay. Bringing diversity into the leadership positions, actually this is how we started on our side. When we saw that in particular in leadership positions we had very low diversity. The most visible one was of gender, obviously, years ago. And this we took this in two ways. We said, okay, we need to be able to, address measures, but also set ourselves targets for that. Yeah. And that is how we achieve progress. But the challenges that we found there were in our environment. It's a financial banking sector. Very much what we had at the top was really men. And there was no real role modeling there. So it was difficult for the women to think that they could make it and that they could aspire. And yesterday we heard about the impact of aspiration, and I would even call it ambition, to get to these roles. So this is why we put the focus very much on bringing diversity into leadership positions, because we felt it will cascade down to other levels, and so it did. So this lack of representation, role modeling at the top continues to be a challenge. We've managed to increase substantially our women in leadership positions, but it's not 50-50, that I can tell you as well. It's more around the 30, for all management, 38% at the moment. But we started very low, so we're very happy with that. It, however, is not even within the organization. So you still have the classic departments where it's easier to see at the top more women, and others were still very difficult. But I must say that it is precisely on senior management positions where we have been putting more effort. And it has been, to some extent, more challenging, but also less, because it has been very visible. So we had to walk the talk and really show commitment there. Another challenge that, to some extent, the aftermath of COVID has helped us with, but still it is a challenge in bringing diversity to leadership positions, is the lack of flexibility there. Because some minority groups, but also women, we know from the research we've done, they really want to be in an environment where they can, work flexibly. Let's call it part-time, let's call it, starting later and leaving later, or, arrange the day as a little bit as you need. And what we have seen as well is that this hinders even career development, because if they do not see that in a particular area the leadership is going to be open to flexibility, they don't even move. So it gives us indications to the working environment and the working culture that leaders are creating, which in itself is going to foster or not further diversity. Yeah. So now, of course, we have, I would say, a rather generous teleworking policy, so, they can play with that, but we still have some work to do when we talk about part-time, sharing even leadership positions. Some organizations do it. We have not managed that to get there yet. So we need to support still this process of bringing diversity into the leadership. And it's, of course, they are going through the entire cycle, from the outreach. So we really are going to career fairs very strongly, also for leaders. With headhunting, we've in the beginning used a lot of headhunting because we were not getting the applications either. And we needed to make sure we got them. Of course, diverse panels, but also all this portfolio of support with mentoring, formal but also informal. We have a super active set of networks that are very supportive of different groups, and they, on their own initiative, of course with the support of the organization, but they organize avenues to help the different groups so that they feel they are equipped to apply, they are equipped to go through processes of promotion, etc. And maybe here, just to finish with an anecdote, you also really need to support that your top leaders are walking the talk. Are walking the talk. Yes, not the top. Maybe that as well. And I remember when we were starting this process, we had to make sure we got, in particular, women to apply for positions, because if they didn't apply, we were not even able to select them, and we were not getting applications. So we introduced this idea that at least we have 1/3 of women in the shortlist, we're going to close the campaign. And our leadership thought we are joking. And we were a bit daring, yeah. But it was not a policy, it was a practice. And sometimes you don't need a policy. You just need to practice and brave managers. And in particular, our head of IT at the time, and IT is not known for being an area where, you have tons of women applying for top positions, or even middle management positions. He said, look, if you don't have 1/3, I am absolutely going to cancel. And their middle management was saying, look, he's just saying that, but he won't do it. And he did it. The first campaign came, it wasn't there, he closed it, and it created a wave. Because they had to put a different effort from the beginning to develop the women they had, to develop their talent, to encourage them to apply. Because the whole process does not start just with the recruitment, it starts much earlier. So we need brave leaders to foster diversity, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Most interesting. Sarah, I don't know if you want to
I think I'll be brief because I agree with everything. What I was going to start with is it's important to celebrate. So as of this moment, the Bank of England has 2 out of our 5 our governor and deputy governors that are women as of this week. And we stand at 50% plus in our executive directors in terms of women. Now that can change at any moment, but that is our position. So that is definitely something to celebrate. We have been much less successful in terms of other demographics, and a couple of years ago, our external governing body did a significant review, and you've probably talked about it here before, where they did what we call a court review to look at our ethnic diversity and inclusion, and that led to a significant action plan. And on my arrival in 2022, we've made disability more of a strategic priority. And I think what I would say, and it's nothing rocket sciencey, that to address your pipeline issues, you need the data, you need to understand the root causes at every stage of your employee life cycle, and that is both in terms of what's going on in people's minds, but also what's going on in your processes and where the blockers are in your processes. And there need to be, as you've just described, some consequences and some results. And I really believe there's something about the granularity of that which can feel very overwhelming. And that's combined with consistency and persistence. And somebody mentioned intentionality earlier. And it's kind of wanting to keep those things going rather than finding each new problem and trying to start up with a new solution. Most of the time we've already started the right solutions, or at least the things that are going to help fix some of the issues, but we kind of just start new things. And I think that focus is critical.
Thank you. Shona or Juan Manuel, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, maybe just to build on a couple of, I suppose, I think it's always interesting when you look at barriers that you know, and how you've overcome them, and then kind of to reflect on that in areas where you think you need to do better and you can see those barriers. I think I was really checking last night that the marriage ban in Ireland for women working in the civil service only was gotten rid of in 1973. So, that's not 100 years ago. It's actually only 51 years ago. And we have, similar to the Bank of England now, we have 2 female deputy governors. We have, I think, nearly 45% of our senior leadership team are female. One of our deputy governors, Sharon Donnery, speaks about when she joined the organisation, there was not even a female head of division, not one, and not one above. So, in terms of recognising success and progress, I think that's really important. I think when you look at the barriers and how those are overcome, I think they equally apply to the full range of what you're seeking to achieve. So, the fact of, I think that the point, like the leadership commitment, is really, really necessary, particularly when it comes to harder actions and call-outs in terms of what's happening. I think when we look at our policies and procedures in supporting women in work, they have been really helpful and successful. Not to say we don't have more to do. I think the access to mentoring, to champions, all of those things are still equally applicable now, I think, in the context of what we're seeking to do more broadly. And I think there's real opportunities learning from where we've seen how we've been able to make progress in terms of seeing, well, where are we not making progress and how do we look to ensure that we're not. I think for me, the discussion and conversation has been, we've been having it for a long time. It's certainly far from over. We still see that under a certain level in our organisation, we have a lot to do in terms of the talent pipeline, but the interventions we've made have been successful. And I think a bit to your point about just because you've started to do something and it hasn't yet yielded results, to stick the course with it. And I think that kind of commitment to saying, this is something we expect to see happen is very powerful in the organisation.
Well, you ask about barriers. Rather than talking about barriers, I like to talk about threats. Threats to build a more diverse, inclusive, equitative world. And I think that threats need to be considered, analyzed, need to be understood, and we need plan connected to these threats just to identify if they exist. If they exist, we need to act. No. So here, I can see three elements or the three threats. Could be more, but the reality is that my top tier is first. It was mentioned before, unconscious bias. I think that is fundamental. We are processing information and make decisions based on our experiences, our own professional and personal, or even our culture. And life is evolving really fast. No, we are living a passionate moments. No, with changes everywhere, fast movements, and we need to adapt quickly in all aspects of life. But in this specific one, it's especially important to be aware that the world is evolving fast. And we need to reconsider many of the things that we have here, no? Because otherwise, probably we are not going to promote this diverse approach, but we are going to have some problems at business level as well, no? And we can talk about some examples later. I have one very clear. I can see one of my colleagues there. Juan is our IT manager, and he's having a lot of problems to recruit people for IT because we have the old-fashioned standards, no? This is university degree, 4 years of a master, so what are we going to do? This is diversity as well, no? It's compromising not only the diverse strategy, it's compromising the business, so this is the first. I think that we have a massive advantage with the college that surround us, researchers. It's fundamental that we connect from HR with them, because they are showing some of the insights that can help us to design the right processes, the right tools for the business. So this connection is one of the main challenges, and I think it's one of the threats if we are not able to do this right. The second element is the lack of enough diverse representation in top management positions. It was also commented before, even Margarita talked about that. And again, yesterday we could see very clear examples that we are not in the right direction. Oliver Garnier, in the closing remarks, was very clear about the numbers, was very clear about the representation that we have at that level. Why this is concerning? It's very clear. For two reasons we have a problem there. The first one is that we are missing the possibility to have the right references for people that need these references to progress, to see these kind of examples, to have mentors, to have sponsors, to build network. If you don't have references, it's much difficult getting to the right place. But there is another element. It's a kind of elephant in the room, no? When we talk about that, is the high representation of men, in this case, we were talking about gender, in middle management positions, and combining this with the meritocratic approach that we want in our processes. So this is another thing that we need to understand. And the third element, again, it was commented by my colleagues before, an attractive environment for future managers, another elephant in the room. We want people to be managers, but is attractive being manager today, especially for not only new generations, also for people that need to take care of their family, their parents. So what are we doing about that? This is important because the flexible patterns will play absolutely critical role in the evolution of this agenda at that level. So talking about supports, and I finish, we have a very structured approach in Banco de España. The first element is having reliable data. This is fundamental. In the last panel, someone told something that I agree. We are perfect providing data, economic data, supervisories, brilliant, legal. We have everything. But when we go to human resources, when we go to our agendas, we're not good. It's very difficult for us analyzing. It's very difficult for us selecting the right elements that we need to follow and to use to underpin our strategic plans. So this is the first data. After that, we need to have a strategy well-defined with ambition and milestone. And this is important. For us, it's important in gender because it's our compass to progress with this element. Without that, we're going to be lost. We will jump to the third element, which is having the D&I agenda with all the actions, with examples. It's nice talking about that, but meaningless because we'll be totally disconnected from the ambition that we want to build. And we are working at that level. Probably in the next intervention, I can mention some of the examples that we are promoting from Banco de España.
Thank you. Maybe we can talk about the other angle we mentioned at the beginning. So the strategies that are effective to encourage a sustainable, and I liked, Shona, when you mentioned a sustainable leadership commitment to D&I. And if you have any success stories, and maybe we can start with you, Juan Manuel, I'm sure the audience would be delighted to hear about.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, success stories. I like talking about examples together with a kind of idea, and I'm going to share with you 4 ideas that are always present in our conversations about DEI. Eva said, what we talk, is fundamental, and reinforcing the engagement and commitment with direct involving of our leadership team is a great way to progress with this agenda. It's basic. Sending the right message from the top level is fundamental to foster this culture. And you could see, we have a great example with our Deputy Governor, Margarita, who is fully committed, but also some LT representatives that are here with us and are play an active role in this agenda. This is fundamental. The second idea is more people connected, better results. That means that we need to involve people apart from HR, apart from LT. This is a bottom-up exercise, a top-down exercise, and we need to work together. A good example we have in Banco de España that was mentioned before by Margarita is the DNA ambassadors, people that are part of the business and help us to develop this agenda in 2 senses, 2 directions. It's bidirectional. On the one hand, they help us to make us aware of the things that are happening in the field, which is fundamental to make your decisions, to propose the actions and solutions. And on the other hand, when we decide things, when LT members make conscious decisions about different elements, they are a loudspeaker to put the message in the field. So these connections, I think that makes the difference. The third element is deep dive. This is about data. I'm sorry for bothering you with this, but it's fundamental having the right data if we want to progress with this agenda. And analyzing specific situation, areas, pipelines, researchers show us the way. And we need to integrate this just to identify where the macro bias are, not everywhere. One of the big mistakes is that sometimes we think that the problems are everywhere. And we have specific problems in a specific area. So probably we need to have some kind of interventions, but not necessarily means that 100% of the organization need to be concerned, just because it's not the case. So having this level of detail helps a lot. And last but not least, I think that this is another fundamental element. We need to change our mind from HR specifically. It's our responsibility, co-create an inclusive culture. Listening to the people, being open to discuss people concerns. Well, we had some experience here, but we are not very good yet with that, By designing flexible patterns. After pandemic, we listen, we propose, but we cannot stop this initiative. We need to keep this contact because we are surrounded by very clever people that want the best interest for the company, in this case for the bank, and for them. So I think that we should not waste this internal talent, and we need to change our mind and to start co-creating with all the stakeholders in the company. I think that these are 4 elements with some examples that are helping us.
Thank you very much. Eva, I don't know if you want to build on that.
Okay, leadership commitment. So when I was thinking about that, I had a list. And then I thought, okay, I need to make a structure out of that. So I think it's about telling, it's about doing, and it's about measuring. telling is, what I mean by that, well, it's a shared responsibility. You mentioned that already. This is not just HR going out and telling, this is great, let's do it. Everybody has to tell the story, and in particular the top has to do that. So, and what we have, for example, is diversity and inclusion is embedded into our strategy, into our business strategy for years now. Even before the pandemic, we had diversity and inclusion as one element. We also had then interim priorities, and it made its way to the strategy again. So it's really, it's about talking business. It's part of it, and it's in the strategy. We have as well a dedicated strategy for diversity and inclusion endorsed by our board. So it really needs to cascade down, and telling is really about being present and telling how important that is. So this morning in the ECB, we had our president, Christine Lagarde, and the chair of the supervisory board, Claudia Buch, together in an event talking about diversity and inclusion and culture. It's really about all that together to our people and engaging with them. This is about telling. It's about doing. It's not just the policies, the practices, but it's really this involvement of everybody. And you mentioned diversity and inclusion ambassadors. We also have them. I see one here. And we have management involved as diversity and inclusion ambassadors. It's not just, expert or professionals. One of them is a manager. This is the commitment they have to bring. We have sponsors, networks that we support, that Eglantine Debo, head of our business partnering, who also is there, is really, together with the networks, very active, and we have a new role. Diversity and inclusion advisor, Silke Heinrichs, with us here as well. So it's really about creating, it's putting resources. Let's face it, as an organization, this is how you show commitment. It needs to cost a bit because it's important. It's doing research. We saw yesterday. This is really investing on research, sharing the data and doing research that gives us information for our policies. So this is the doing part. And the measuring, it will not be too long. It's really what we do. It's more than the data. It's really about the accountability. It's about setting the targets, the whole debate, targets, quotas, really, I don't care. It's really about seeing how you look against something that should be where we want to get. And communicating about that and showing that maybe we are not perfect. So doing service to our people, but also certifications. We did EDGE, economic dividend for gender equality certification, and this is something that goes public. So if you don't look good, you don't look good, but there you are. So this is how we show as well accountability through measurement. So telling it, the story, doing things, and measuring and being and showing that you are accountable. This is how the leadership should invest on this, and we do it.
Thank you very much. We are running a bit out of time, and I would like to have some time for questions. But just before we pass the floor to the audience, maybe Shona or Sarah, do you want to add anything
I'll try
else?
and be brief. So you asked about successes. 20 months in a central bank is probably not enough time to feel you can have had success. But I worked at a top university. I've worked in a tax service and in the UK Defence Service, and all of those I saw successes. And for me, the key things, and these are things we're taking forward at the Bank of England, and it's exactly what people have said, it's about the collective ownership and collective leadership approach across the organisation, so that diversity, equity and inclusion is neither an add-on or HR's responsibility. It's about reframing your organisation to think about it as the skills base that you need. And at the bank, some of the pieces of work that we're doing are really looking at what our employer value proposition is and really integrating our thoughts around diversity, equity and inclusion into that. We are looking at our talent strategy and making sure that it's integrated into that. And again, a point that Manuel made, moving from the difference between consultation and real co-creation with the communities that are affected, all of which lead you to have an interconnected and intersectional approach. I think there is something about recognising and moving the mindset of the organisation from it not being just 1 year, but you have to repeat what you've done in the first year, in the second year, and the third year and the fourth year. I think there's also something about recognising that our leaders have not been equipped to do some of the things that we want them to do now, and we have to provide that support. And then there's also something about looking at the way we work. I will be quick. And in the bank, what we are looking at is our central services operating model, our people operating model, and our culture, diversity, equity and inclusion operating model, because they were all no longer fit for purpose for for this century. So and within that, we're looking at the knowledge, skills and abilities that we need in our expert workforce to be able to help and support the wider workforce. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
And I might just add just something really briefly. I think what's been interesting in the Central Bank of Ireland is our leadership commitment to D&I, not just for our organisation, but in terms of looking outwards, in terms of the firms or the regulated financial service providers that we supervise. So one of the things that we have been looking to do is to advocate to them the importance of diversity and inclusion. And actually we publish an annual kind of demographics report. I think we're publishing the one for 2023 today. And what that tells us is that in, I think, 2012, only 16% of applicants for senior roles in financial services were women, and that is up to 32% in 2023. So we've also incorporated into our supervision. So we've looked at behaviour and culture through supervision. We've also looked at diversity and inclusion, and we've published 2 thematic assessments in the banking sector and the insurance sector. So we see ourselves in terms of our commitment to D&I, not just being for ourselves as an organisation, but also to amplify it out in terms of looking beyond, our own role and looking to support it more broadly as well.
Thank you. So we don't have much time left, but I do want to listen from the audience if you have any question.
Hi, thank you. Thank you to the panel. I'm Diane, I work for the Bank of England. I'm the head of the Digital Pound Division, and I'm also the executive sponsor for our staff working group. I was 2 days ago, I was participating in a conference here in Madrid, payments conference, in a fireside chat about digital pound, digital euro. And at the break, 2 women approached me and said, "Oh, we're so surprised that there's a Spaniard leading the digital pound project." And the other woman said, "Oh, and a woman too." Like, these 2 things, right? And if this wasn't enough, they then said, "How did you manage to get the job?" And I didn't know how to respond initially. I didn't know how to feel, right? So I thought I had to state the obvious, which is I thought I was the best person for the job, right? And what struck me is that they were still expecting the classical white male British in a leadership position in the bank. And when I did say to them, well, the Bank of England is quite a diverse organization, you see, they were very genuinely surprised. So again, the question for the panel is, not only what are we doing internally for, get more diversity in the top leadership of our organizations, but how are we projecting this externally so people are not surprised that we're not just white male British or Spaniards or French in our respective organizations. Thank you.
So I think there is 2 sides. So the work I mentioned around our employer value proposition, how we frame who we are and what we do, and the diversity of jobs and the diversity of people, and the different ways that we, and the person from the Bank of Ireland talked about the videos they've done, so how we use those kind of tools is one way. But I think there's also a constraint that we face, and certainly in the UK, that we are far more reticent to communicate externally, which holds us back from sharing the positive and the good news. And it's a really difficult conundrum, and I'd actually welcome other people's perspectives on how they've managed that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think Micheál alluded to it, that we have very consciously tried to allow people to see the diversity that is in the Central Bank of Ireland, because I think there was that perception of, certainly expectation of who works there, and maybe we weren't, part of our strategy is open and engaged, so we're conscious now in terms of, and not falsely reflecting the reality of the diversity that's in our organisation through the videos. Were surprisingly, sometimes you think you have to do an awful lot, but sometimes these kind of rather what felt like a small action had a huge impact that went well beyond what we thought. and it has been commented on, and people kind of coming to interviews saying, I would never have thought of applying here, but for I attended something and I heard somebody. We have a retail intermediary roadshow where we go out on tour across Ireland, and I think I heard some of the feedback coming back was people were saying, I never thought about working in the Central Bank of Ireland, but maybe I would. So I think it's a point well made in terms of that reflection back of who is working in our organisations and how publicly accessible is that.
Just to take it from there, it's indeed surprising sometimes to go to career fairs and recognize that people would have never thought of working for your organization. So really managing that brand is super important when you want to attract other profiles that are not the standard that you normally get. Beyond that, what I wanted to mention is, for me, what is important is to have a community of allies within, I call it friends and family. I mean, in the central banking community, we have other central banks that are having a different setup of their workforce challenges, but ultimately, it's really about sharing best practices. I mean, we've heard very different shades of different or the same or similar initiatives today, and maybe also referred to yesterday. And this shows that leveraging on each other and learning from each other is super important, and also being vocal about what we want to achieve together. So, for example, within the European system of central banks and SSM, we have signed a charter for diversity and inclusion, which is very explicit externally of the commitment. And everybody is very proudly using this to amplify how they see themselves as an employer. And this is really this external aspect of, who do we want to be, how do we want to look like, and what are the values we want to have in the organization. Not just inward looking, but sharing it with others.
And don't forget, Eva, next project that we are coordinating across Eurosystem is to work in culture, to work in attraction. Because when talking about the possibilities to cooperate across Eurosystem, again, we identified that this was a very clear one. How can we go together and to promote the amazing things that we have internally? And a second reflection, I think that we are still suffering this restrictive approach to internal and external communication. Because of our activity, we are prudent, we prefer not talking about, and historically, if nobody talks about central banking, is that things are going well. But we are facing some challenges at that level when talking to the audience internally and externally again. So I think that this is an opportunity rather than a risk.
Thank you so much. So I think we've run out of time, so we have a coffee awaiting for us outside. You have to go through that door. And if you have any other questions, please address the panelists. Thank you so much for your participation.